Okay, finally got there, Scott, after a few technical hitches between me myself. Um, Thanks for joining us, Scott. First of all, I'm contributing to obviously our video content catalogue that we're creating for the students at DNA. For those of you who don't know, this is Scott Memure. He's obviously a local police officer. He's the community police officer for the campus for Dundee Isles College as well. He partners with in quite a lot of different things. Scott's fantastic, as you're about to find out yourself. Today, Scott's come on to talk to us about kind of frauds and scams and obviously what's going about at the moment, and obviously how to be aware of these frauds and scams, and obviously how to prevent falling victim to these fraudsters. So thanks very much, Scott, for doing that today. You want to tell us about yourself and what your official title is?
Yeah, officially I always go down the old-fashioned way. It's community safety, but officially we're the preventions officer, and I cover education, so it's all schools and universities and colleges and the whole of Tayside, so it's not just Dundee and Angus. From yourselves, I'll probably cover all 4 campuses, 3 campuses. No, it's 3, isn't there? Yeah. And I'll try and get to them all. Obviously, in the last year, I've not been to any of them, but this is probably the best we can do just now. Most of my time is spent advising learner engagement and student association. I do speak to students. We do the odd, I suppose you could call them inputs. Usually it's internet safety and hate crime and drugs. But anything at all, even if a student comes up to me in the corridor, I'm quite happy to speak to them, and if they've got any questions. I don't have the answers to everything because I'm not an expert in everything, but I'll usually say, if I don't know what it is, I'll come back to you because I'll find somebody that does.
Yeah, that's the best way, I suppose, isn't
that? Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so just a simple Q&A today, Scott. Obviously, a few questions to ask you about kind of fraud, and obviously give us the expert point of view on it, and obviously inform our students about it. Is that okay?
Yeah, no bother.
Okay. First of all, obviously, I think this is quite a common kind of query. What's the most common types of frauds and scams that are going about just now that people need to be aware of?
It's probably quite good to speak about it in this last year, because this is when things have changed a bit, because people are spending an awful lot more time on their laptops and phones and tablets, that we're getting a lot more online. I work in an office where there's somebody next to me speaks to people daily about frauds, and he'll deal with adults too. When I say adults, people who are not students, that's probably the best way to describe it. The most common ones is people getting unsolicited emails and texts, and there's a link on the email or a text that they've got to press, and it will ask for your personal details after that, because ultimately, I'm going to go into this later, but it's not from National Insurance or HMRC, it's from somebody sitting in a room someplace who pretending to be HMRC. In fact, I had one a couple of weeks ago from O2 who I've not had an account with for about 10 years. And there was a link attached to it, and it was from O2 to say I hadn't paid my bill. You press the link and it asks for your personal details. Brazenly enough, it'll say bank details, and folk do put their bank details in. I've not got an O2 account. It can come from somebody who you've got an account with. But the most common ones just now are folk, I suppose you could call it cold calling. That's what we would call it if they come to your door and, hi, I'm from whatever it is. We're looking for some details because you've got an account outstanding or whatever. But that's probably kicked off more in the last year for obvious reasons, because of COVID, because folk are spending a lot more time online than they used to. The other one we get, and it's more to do with relating to older people, is people come to your door trying to do work, and they'll say £2,000 to cut some trees down, and then they'll cut one tree down and get your money off you and then disappear. That's a bit different because that's not online. That's more, it has to be face-to-face. But they'll do a wee bit of work, but not quite enough. But they tend to target, I'm going to say elderly. It makes me feel old when I start speaking about ages, but people who are a wee bit more elderly rather than maybe the student population. Online's your student one.
Okay. It's quite funny you say actually, because yesterday, believe it or not, I had a call very similar to what you described there.
Yeah.
For someone claiming to be a Sky representative, talking about obviously that your system's gone down, your internet's being faulty.
Yeah.
We're looking to fix it for you, and then not long after that, my Wi-Fi started breaking in and out. So for some way, they've managed to get into my Wi-Fi system, and I phoned Sky themselves directly because I was a bit kind of concerned about it. It seemed suspicious. And they said, obviously, this is what they do. They manipulate your Wi-Fi to make you think you've got a real issue and trick you, give them details. I didn't do that, obviously, because I'm a bit more savvy. But
yeah,
you're totally right. It's been a lot more common, these calls, in the last 6 months, I would say, certainly for myself, from a personal point of view.
You know what you see quite a lot of? They'll ask you to download software. Now, the software, and without wanting to name it, we can all download software so that somebody can, say your elderly parents are struggling with their Wi-Fi, it's possible for me to control their Wi-Fi if they give me permission. And they will ask, scammers will ask you to download software, and they'll have it as well. And the next minute, they've got access to your computer, and they're doing what they like. There's a legitimate way of doing that, because I can do it. I get regular calls from my parents struggling to work their Wi-Fi. It's constant.
Yeah. It's unbelievable what these guys can do.
Yeah, you can do it legitimately, but most of the time it's folk just trying to manipulate your... once they've got access to your well, here's a good example. They can get into your Amazon account and you can find out your bank details, you know. So it's dead easy if you've got the know-how.
Yeah. Obviously, you mentioned that the elderly population tend to be kind of more face-to-face, which is obviously, thankfully, I suppose, is one good thing about COVID. That'll be under reduction, I suppose, but it's one way of looking at being positive. And obviously, student populations tend to be kind of online scams. Which age groups are most common in falling victims to scams?
It's by far and away older folk. So people in their maybe 60s and 70s, purely because they're a bit more vulnerable. I've written the word at the top of here, vulnerability. That's what they're looking for all the time. It's people that are savvy are less likely to fall, albeit we have had people who are computer experts that still fall for these type of things. When it comes to students, and I had to ask about this, the guy I work with who knows about these things, and he mentioned to me a lot about rental properties, and I don't know if you've got many students that come from that are going to stay in a private flat, but you're going to get that. And if you go through a factor and you're renting properties, you find that folk will be asked by the people who own the flat to go into WhatsApp to do the dealings after that, and then they ask you for bank details so they can do that. If you're going to rent a flat that's from a factor, do all the dealings through the factor. Don't do it, I suppose, off piste the last day there. You know, when there's nobody can see what's happening, because they will take money off you. We have had people given thousands of pounds via a WhatsApp chat about a flat, and then the person will say, "I can meet you, give you the key," then they disappear. They've got your money and they'll never be seen again. So from a student point of view, renting flats is something we're seeing a lot of just now, where people are being scammed because they're trying to rent flats on WhatsApp, which is ideal for chatting, but not for renting flats. It's not what you do, is it? So
it's quite strange to say that. That's very interesting for me personally, because obviously everything you open a WhatsApp chat, I tell you, is end-to-end encrypted, and that makes me, who's got no idea about fraud or internet safety, feel safe. But obviously it's not as safe as I would think.
No, it's not. And you know what? If you're having a chat with somebody on WhatsApp, the deal about being encrypted is that nobody else, including the police to a certain extent, can find out what the chat's about. So it's really difficult for us to find out what's been said. I would say if you've got into a chat, then screenshot your page. So if you screenshot it, then I have access to it, albeit it's a screenshot. But then I can see what's being said. Otherwise, I'm really struggling because it's all gone, and because it's encrypted means I can't get access to it. I'm going to guess it'll be possible if it was for something serious, but I would really have to be on the serious side of things. The other thing we spoke about, and this is maybe slightly different, is the thing called I'm going to get this right. A SIM swap. It's not easy to say. If you're finding that your bills are bigger than they should be on your mobile, we're hard finding that folk are managing to take access to your SIM card. I don't know how to do it, and if I did, I probably wouldn't say here, would I? But it's getting access to your SIM card. The way to find out if you've been a victim of a SIM swap is by turning off your Wi-Fi on your phone. And if you're still able to use your phone as normal, then that means there's a good chance it's a SIM swap. And then if you put your Wi-Fi back on again, you'll find that it starts to struggle again. So keep an eye on people taking access to your phone. It's actually dead easy for somebody that knows how to do it to get access to your phone. They can pretend to be you and phone up, let's say, 3 or Vodafone. And the companies are not necessarily as strict as they probably should be.
Okay.
So some SIM swaps we're seeing a lot of, and I sit in the room with the guy who deals with it, and he's hearing about it all the time, and he'll give folk advice on how to get around it. I'll be honest with you, I think you need to know what you're doing before you can do it, but some folk will do it.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously you mentioned that given COVID and obviously lockdown, and obviously it's online's a bit more common, but is there any other reason why it is so common just now, these frauds taking place?
I hate to accuse folk of being naive, but it pretty much is. If you're naive and you're not thinking too hard about what you're doing, then I don't mean that in a bad way, but you will get caught out. People are quite happy to say that they know everything about not getting caught out, and then they're going to give their bank details. You wouldn't believe how many folk have passed their bank details to a stranger on the phone. It happens every day, and I hear about it every day. It's naivety. I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm not accusing folk of being naive, but that's really the gist of it. Don't give anything out. So if somebody comes up to you in the street, here's a good example of it. In, I'm going to say Reform Street in Dundee just for the argument's sake, and says, going to give me your bank details and maybe your PIN number as well, you wouldn't contemplate giving away your details. But somebody will text you and say, I'm from O2, can I have your bank details? And people are happy enough to give them out. So think about what you would do if you were face-to-face.
That's a good point, actually. A really good tip. It's a good way
yeah, it's exactly the same. You don't give your details out to anybody because you don't know who they are.
Yeah. It'd be a very, very difficult conversation if somebody came up to me in the street and asked for my bank details.
I know. And I'll tell you what, even if we go that far, there are folk who have had, I'm going to use the word hacked here. I'm not convinced things are hacked when they've had messenger messages from a friend asking for details and they'll give them out because you think it's a friend, you discover it's not your friend, it's somebody that's managed to get access to your friend's messenger account. I don't think hacked's a word. I don't know how, from a computer expert, I would probably use the wrong one, but that's the gist of it. They've had access to somebody else's messenger and you would give your details to a friend because you trust them.
It's actually quite scary, this, because I'm thinking back now, and I've had a couple of those in the last month, and when they can become commonplace the last few years anyway, these Facebook ones and Instagram ones where your friend sends you a link, and then all of a sudden you see in their Facebook page about 5 minutes later, please don't open a link, I've been what they call hacked as well.
You know what I would say, if your friend asked you for £250 and just transfer it through bank, you would probably phone them, would you? You would probably say, is there anything else I can help you with? You wouldn't just say, I no bother, and just pass them £250. But if you've got a mate who's asking for money, phone them in like the old-fashioned way, face-to-face.
Yeah.
Or not face-to-face nowadays, is it? And ask them what the problem is.
I think that's the issue, is when it happens on Facebook so often, it becomes frequent. It becomes almost like it's normal. Yeah. So you become normalised to it, so you're less cautious, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But be old-fashioned and phone somebody by ringing their number and saying, is there anything I could help you with? You're needing money here. It turned out they'll probably say no because it wasn't me.
Yeah.
But the friend thing's quite common, I'll be honest with you.
So you're giving a bit of advice and a couple of tips, obviously, on how to avoid it if it's like interactions on a personal level. But have you got any other tips that students can have in how to avoid falling victim to scams and frauds?
Yeah. So the main thing is, and this is going to be really obvious, if you get a text message or a mobile number, an email from somebody that pretends to be a company, that you can't look at it. If you drop down the top bit which shows you who it's from, it's generally not obviously from Vodafone. It'll be from somebody. It'll be loads of mixed up numbers. So you can look at the top. They're getting quite clever and making it look like a Vodafone email address it's gone from. But if you look at it closely, you can tell it's not from Vodafone. So that's the way to do it. If you get unsolicited emails, if they've come to you asking for something, or if you get text messages from somebody, I would be tempted just to ignore it. Unsolicited means that they're to try and scam you. I would say that all the time. Although I have to be honest with you, I had an email recently from Lloyd's TSB, and I don't have an account with them. So I went into the bank and discovered that it was the same company that owned Lloyd's that also owned my bank. He says, that was from us. And you feel like saying, we spend hours having conversations with banks about not falling for these things, and yet they're sending me emails. But I didn't answer it. I went to a bank. So the main tip you would say is if you get something from your bank, is actually phone the bank up or go on your online banking or actually go into a bank, which I know doesn't happen so much nowadays, and actually ask them whether it was them. They'll probably say no because they shouldn't be sending you emails. But that's go the way that you would be comfortable with. Email them, phone them, actually go into the bank. I'm going to show you a wee thing here. I don't know if this clear this will be. This is a thing called Take 5. There you go. I'll get there eventually. So this is a campaign that we use called Take 5, and the gist of Take 5, it's got all my notes on it there, is that you take 5 minutes. If somebody tries to get something off you, take 5 minutes to think about it. And after 5 minutes, generally you'll be going, maybe this is not quite right. So we use, you'll see that Take 5 in loads of banks. Santander are quite strong with us just now about adopting the Take 5 thing. And it stops fraud because you're almost thinking about what you're doing for 5 minutes before you do it. So we push the Take 5 pretty much to everybody that we speak about these type of things.
That's a really good piece of advice. That Take 5. The Take 5 scheme, you said that's called, is it?
Yeah, the banks. Yeah. As you can see from there, there's a black hand with a Take 5. Where is it again?
There you go.
There you go. So it's got a black hand in the middle. If you go to Santander, you will see it because they're probably one of the most proactive, but the banks will all do it. And if you take 5 minutes, there's a good chance that your mind will say, you know what, maybe that's not right there. And if you start to doubt what you're doing, there's a good chance it'll not happen.
Yeah, really good piece of advice, because a lot of the time, if they are calling you, I suppose, they kind of catch you off guard.
Yeah.
Kind of put you on the spot, so you're less likely to think more clearly. So Take 5, that's a brilliant piece of advice. Personally,
they want an answer now. Somebody scamming you wants you to make an answer, give them an answer right now.
Yeah.
But if you don't do it right now, there's a good chance they'll get fed up. You know about folk that get phone calls, and if you're a bit smarter about things, you start to ask them questions. And the minute that you ask the scammer questions, they're going to get put off. They do hang up and say, "Oh, just leave it then," because they know that you're a bit more savvy than who they're looking for. So
it's quite funny you say that, actually, because I also have a lot of these cold calls all the time, and people saying that you've had a car crash or a car accident where obviously, and after a while, because they were very common, I got kind of, like you said, savvy to them. So my wife always kind of has a go at me because I kind of lead them on, have a bit of fun with them and a bit of a laugh, saying, "Oh yeah, I was in a really bad accident, yeah," and just waste their time and try and kind of prevent them from actually getting to other people.
Yeah.
So yeah, right. It's about probing them, making them feel uncomfortable, obviously, so they're not likely to call you back again. So you're absolutely right.
If you start to ask them questions, they'll hang up.
Yeah, that's what they do.
I'm interested in
100%
somebody
of the time.
who's looking to be smarter than them, because they're not looking for folk to be too smart. They're looking for people who know to think about it too hard at all.
Yep.
But I would say that you question everything. Don't believe who you get messages from. Don't believe messages you get from your mates. It's very cynical, isn't it? But
that's the way the world is. Unfortunately, you've got to be a bit more savvy nowadays.
Yeah.
So obviously you talked about what kind of things we can do, obviously as students and kind of elderly populations, all different kind of groups to avoid these scams.
Yeah.
What is it you guys do, the police yourself, to prevent people becoming victims of fraud?
So what we tend to do is if the people have phoned us because of a fraud, then it comes to our department. So I work in the community safety, and there's a guy in our office. He generally phones the people up who have been the victim and asks them if there's anything they could do to help. So it might be training standards, it might be victim support, because we have access to victim support. And you can say no to that, but it's really just to provide the support, because victim support can continue the support after they've been us. We will advise them to block and delete emails, so you can block calls on your phone. So if you get a call from somebody constantly, the problem with scammers is they'll tend to change the number that they're phoning from all the time, so that you continually block them. But we really just look at to support somebody who's been a victim. You do get folks saying quite a lot, "I can't believe it happened to me," and you always say, well, you know what, these people are dead smart, they're making money off it. Whether true or not, I remember hearing recently about the police in a Far Eastern country going to an office building, and this was an office building full of scammers who were doing it for a living, and they had accountants and they had managing directors, and if you looked at it, it would look like an office. It didn't look like, it's not what you would expect scammers to be. Maybe you would be, actually. So they were going into professional organisations who were scamming people. So they're looking for that, and if they can get £200 off John, then they're getting that off hundreds of people. It's not just John they're getting money off. So really want to make it uncomfortable and make sure that you're not going to fall for these things, because ultimately, once you've been hooked, then it's dead difficult to get out of it. But they are professionals; they know exactly what they're doing.
So it's kind of like a large scale operation. That's quite scary, actually, when you think about it.
More common than you would expect, and I would say there are certain countries it would come from, but a lot in the Far East and Africa. But it doesn't have to be. It could be anywhere. But they're there. If they can get 50 quid off one person, they're getting 50 quid off 200 and 300 people. So it might not seem much money to you, but they're not just getting off you.
Yep.
So I would always say, if you get anything from people, block them, delete the number, whatever you want to do. Put the email into spam so that it's continually going to spam, and you won't get hassled again, because you're not going to be able to answer them if you don't see it.
Perfect. I think that's all the questions we've got, Scott. In terms of obviously the information about fraud scams, is there anything else you want to add on to that?
I did ask before, which was the most common one just now. I should have brought this up earlier. I'm probably being a bit late in putting this up. I did ask the guy that I work with, which he sees as most common, and he was saying that there's 3 that he's seen more often just now. National Insurance, which is obviously a government organisation, are asking you to log on to confirm your details. We're seeing that. That's really common just now. So if you get in from the National Insurance or HMRC, which is the tax office, my 13-year-old daughter had a text from HMRC asking to confirm her details. So they don't even know who they're speaking to, because she's not got a tax code.
Yeah, of course.
At 13. But that's the 2 common ones. The other one, and this has been going for years, is that you might find sometimes you get somebody pretending to be a police force asking you to buy so many £100 worth of Amazon vouchers. They get you to scratch the codes, or iTunes vouchers, get you to scratch the codes off the back. You give them the codes, and the police force are then saying, that's okay, we won't arrest you now, after you've given them all the codes for your iTunes vouchers, maybe not so much iTunes now, is it? Oh, you could do, yeah, or Amazon vouchers. All they're looking for is you to buy them and send the codes. Now, police would never do that.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
They would never. You wouldn't be arrested for not sending Amazon voucher codes. Yeah. You know.
That's good to know.
Yeah, another thing we do a lot is we've got a lot of working with the banks. So there's a thing called the banking protocol, which the banks are being trained that if they suspect someone is contacting them because they've been scammed, then they don't give them the money, and they phone the police, and the police will come along. So we have them probably every day, where we've got banking protocols in Tayside. It's a good thing, because the banks are then becoming a bit more savvy about what they're dealing with, and they won't give out £2,000 to an elderly person who's getting their trees cut down unless we can confirm that it's genuine. Because there are occasions when it's actually happening, but 9 times out of 10 it's not. And the banking protocol is something that was developed between us and the banks just to make sure that we're all kind of working together and making sure these things don't happen. So if you go to the bank and they refuse your money, don't go in a huff. It's because they're actually doing it because they're looking to keep your money, and that they know what they're doing.
Is it like the one-time passcodes you get sent when you try to get into a bank or something? Is that kind of the bank protocol? Is that
yeah. Most of the banking protocol things we get are actually folk going into the bank and asking for £2,000 to get their tree cut down, and then they'll say, well, that's not right. Sometimes more money than that. It's actually you're frightening how much people are asking for. Online's not quite so common. It's mostly bank face to face. So if you go and try and take £3,000 out of your bank today, there's a good chance they'll question that and ask you why you're taking it out, and that's a good thing. Sometimes people take it badly, but it's probably not a bad thing. So I guarantee you should get questioned if you take large amounts out of your bank. I wish I had large amounts to take out, but if you did,
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, isn't it?
Yeah, people at the bank get a lot of hassle for it, but they understand that there's reasons why these things happen, and if it can stop somebody losing £3,000 or £2,000, then it's a bonus, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, they're there to protect your money at the end of the day.
It's their job. That's their money as well, isn't it? So there is a self-interest there.
A vested interest, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'd rather they had a vested interest in keeping us safe as well, instead of having no interest and having less prerogative to do it, So
yeah, I mean, I've heard there's been sad stories about people losing their life savings to fraudsters.
Yeah.
And they're in their 70s and everything's gone and they've lost everything. So, but it can happen to students too. I always say it's mostly old folk, but it's not just old folk. It can happen to any age, Yeah,
and that's why we're here today in the video. And hopefully what you've said today can help somebody.
Yeah.
If we can at least stop one person being kind of falling victim of fraud, then this video is worth it in itself, in my opinion. So
yeah.
Thank you very much for coming today and chatting to us, Scott.
No, my pleasure.
Well, we've
got another one next week.
Yeah, you're going to be back in next week. Yeah, talk about hate crime. So we'll get that scheduled up. Obviously, let people on the page know when it's going to be happening, and obviously we'll get that up and running, and then chat to you next week. Yeah,
if there's anybody that's watching that wants to get in touch with me, if you go through yourselves, I can give them advice. I've done that quite a lot of times, so I don't mind email getting passed out as long as the emails are decent questions. And if they come through yourselves, a student association, they've got my email address. Any questions at all?
Okay, hear that, guys. Anyone's watching the video later on or now, if you want to know, just come and chat to the Learner Engagement team in person if we're back in Compass eventually. But in the meantime, obviously, you've got our social media pages, you've got our email address, or contact us there. Just let us know. We'll pass your information to Scott if you want to know more. And thank you very much, Scott. We really appreciate that.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Okay, take care. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.